Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Garrett Smith, the Nutrition Detective. And today in this presentation, we're going to be going over how vitamin A, it's not really vitamin, it's poison. Vitamin A increases obesity and makes you fatter. And the evidence, as is said in the title, will amaze you. So first, what are we talking about? Obesity in America and other westernized countries, or the Western world. It's exploding. Something like 2/3 of Americans are overweight and a full third of them are obese, I believe were the last stats I saw. Some people want to blame carbs and sugar or sugar. Some people want to blame fat. Some people want to blame meat. Some people want to blame plant foods. What if it's none of those things by themselves? But it's actually this poison that we've been taught to call vitamin A that was linking all of them and can cause problems in all of those in its own way. The evidence is pretty clear, and I'm going to demonstrate it here for you today. First, some definitions. We always have to know what we're talking about, right? Vitamin A means all of the carotenoids, including beta carotene, retinol esters, that's the storage form of it that nobody hardly ever talks about, and retinoic acids. These are these so-called active forms of vitamin A. All of them. Anybody who says carotenoids are not vitamin A, they're completely wrong, because all the retinol and retinol esters and retinoic acid came from carotenoids. There is no vitamin A anywhere of any type without carotenoids to begin. So, another important thing to note is that there are no scientific differences, no chemical differences between synthetic vitamin A's that are, retinol palmitate, carotenoids, and the stuff you get out of food. If you can show me actual scientific evidence that these are different, I'd love to see it, because you can't. They're processed in the body exactly the same way. Next, BMI, body mass index. This is a measure of body fat based on height and weight, and that applies to population levels, not person by person, but population levels of adult men and women. Higher numbers generally mean more body fat. I know people can get into all sorts of arguments about BMI, but generally looking at height and weight across populations can tell you how fat that population is. It's useful in that way, not individual by individual. Now, serum retinol. What does this mean? If you hear serum retinol, it's really what they're saying is blood vitamin A levels. Okay? Not great at showing tissue storage levels, not good at all at showing tissue storage levels. It's blood vitamin A. It's what's flowing through you at that time. Next, carotenemia, carotemia, carotenemia. This means high levels of beta carotene in the blood. It typically shows up as yellowing or orangish colored skin. You may have seen it in somebody, you may have had it yourself if you're watching this. Too many carotenoids. The body's trying to shove them into the skin to get them out of the bloodstream. Last, we have RBP, or retinol binding protein. This is an important one to understand. This protein, retinol binding protein, is measured as a surrogate or stand-in lab for serum retinol, or blood vitamin A. They're measuring a protein to measure for the vitamin. Doesn't make a lot of sense, does it? To begin with, they don't measure proteins for other vitamins too often. Why would they measure it here? But anyway, the thing you need to know is some people will argue about RBP and retinol and which one means what. The body does not make retinol binding protein unless there was retinol around that triggered it to make it. Okay? RBP means that retinol was around, because you can have retinol binding protein that doesn't have a retinol in it floating around, but the body made it because there was retinol there. Retinol can come out and turn into retinoic acid or retinol esters, and then the RBP is empty, but it was made in response to retinol being around. Hope that makes sense. Retinol binding protein, based on the great work of Grant Genereux, and I'll link to his blog later in this post, ggenereux.blog, and you can find the link in the the slides that'll be in the bottom description of this video. He was showing evidence that retinol binding protein is actually an antibody, and this is probably why vitamin A is so linked to autoimmunity, but that's a whole nother discussion we're not going to do today. So what are we going to cover? And what do we have references for? All of these I have references for. What are we going to cover today? Serum retinol levels correlate almost exactly with BMI, body mass index, a measure of fatness in Americans. We're going to look at higher levels of vitamin A being associated with higher BMI and other things we don't want in both men and women. High levels of blood beta-carotene are associated with hypothyroidism, diabetes, liver, and kidney disease. Eating liver, the highest vitamin A food out there, eating beef liver, has been associated with chronic headaches and obesity. Accutane use, the active form of vitamin A, and yes, your body does make Accutane. We'll cover that again. Your body can turn vitamin A into Accutane, the same form. Has been shown to increase insulin resistance and diabetes directly. Obesity has been associated with higher retinol binding protein RBP levels. Glyphosate, Roundup, inhibits the breakdown of vitamin A, this poison. As glyphosate use has gone up, so have obesity rates, and this has happened in multiple countries. Direct relationship. Birth control raises vitamin A levels, and birth control use has been associated with obesity. Antidepressants stop the breakdown of vitamin A, and antidepressant use, as many people learn later and are very disappointed to find out, antidepressant use has also been associated with increasing obesity. Wow, that's a lot of things, right? So let's cover each one of these. First, we always have people go, but well, I don't take vitamin A. How can I get vitamin A toxicity? I just don't understand. How is this happening, Dr. Smith? How is this happening to people today and it didn't used to? The world is very different from the world of 50 years ago, before glyphosate. The world's very different today than the world of 100 years ago. But let's go through it. People being encouraged. Let's go over the food and the stuff that's very obvious first. People eating lots of yellow, orange, reddish, dark green fruits and vegetables. People are trying to eat more of these today. They think it's healthy. They think eat a rainbow when they don't actually realize that one of the things nature tends to do is mark poisonous plants and animals with bright colors to tell other animals it's poisonous. So when you look at it that way and you go, wow, people used to eat mostly white vegetables and light green and green, and they weren't getting into all the fancy colored stuff. Maybe there was a reason. Then we get into things like dairy, egg yolks, liver. People are encouraging each other to eat a lot of these. We have vitamin A fortified foods. And the list of successfully fortified foods with vitamin A includes, these are different countries, milk and dairy, cereals, cereal grains, sugar. This happens a lot in Central America, South America, and Mexico. Fats and oils, margarine, and instant noodles with spice mix. That's not something I've come across, but that's something that's probably, I'm guessing that's happening in Asia. So, vitamin A in supplements, and this includes carotenoids. Cosmetic products that contain vitamin A. So many of them contain vitamin A products. I saw a commercial the other day where they were talking about 2 products that you would use together that both have vitamin A in them. You absorb it through your skin, absolutely. Vitamin A-based medications like Accutane and retinol. We have glyphosate and Roundup exposure in non-organic foods and other environmental exposures. We have medications that stop or slow down vitamin A breakdown. This includes birth control, we're going to go over that one. Antidepressants, we're going to go over that one. Antibiotics, antifungals, etc. We have foods that slow vitamin A breakdown. I'm not going to go over that here. That is something I go over in my vitamin A detox program. So that's a big topic. And then we go over supplements that slow down vitamin A breakdown. Same mechanisms as the foods, but when you get supplements, they're even more concentrated, so they're even more powerful. So I just realized I forgot my mic. Sorry if I haven't been sounding good, but that's one of those things about live. Hopefully you heard some of it. We'll see if we're going to keep it up or take it down and redo it. But on this note, of all these things I just went over, how many have you been exposed to? How many have other people been exposed to? It only takes one. Okay, people will go and take Accutane and say, this thing ruined my health for life. It only takes one. People go on a new diet and they're like, I'm eating liver all the time and I'm going to be super healthy. And then they're not. How many women do you know who've taken birth control and been like, my health has never been the same since? I started juicing carrots and I turned orange and now I'm hypothyroid. Okay, these are very real things. It only takes one, and we have people doing multiple of them. So first, I want to go over a simple graph. Now, this graph, hard to show you on this video. We'll see if we can't get a view of this. You see that graph? This is in the notes. Hopefully we can focus on it. Those two lines, you can see it enough. The blue and gray lines. One of those, the blue one is the BMI, I believe, of Americans. Or that's the serum retinol. Blue is serum retinol. Gray is the BMI of Americans. You just need to see how those lines go right up together. Serum, vitamin A, and serum and BMI, body fat, a measure of body fatness in a population. Those are almost exactly the same line. Isn't that weird? So Grant Genereux made that graph. Want to give him credit. He did a great job on it. That can be found on his blog, which is linked on next to this graph. Amazing, right? Just that one. People say, oh, you can correlate anything. Well, that's why I'm going to correlate from multiple angles here. Next, higher retinol binding protein means fatter people. Let's go over the study called Retinol Binding Protein 4 and Insulin Resistance in Lean, Obese, and Diabetic Subjects. Quote, elevated serum RBP4 was associated with components of the metabolic syndrome, including increased body mass index, waist to hip ratio, serum triglyceride levels, and systolic blood pressure and decreased high-density lipoprotein cholesterol levels, end quote. Going to simplify that for you. More RBP, more retinol-binding protein, which means more vitamin A, means that more vitamin A was around. And what did that result in? Higher BMI, fatter people, that's bad. Higher waist to hip ratio, that's a fatter waist versus your hips, that's bad. Higher triglycerides. Did you got high triglycerides? Do you know that vitamin A has been shown over and over to cause high triglycerides? Higher systolic blood pressure. That's bad. Decreased HDL. That's supposedly the good cholesterol. And that's lower. That's bad. We don't want that. You want higher HDL. Okay. So now we go into the next paper. Higher retinol binding protein means fatter women and their hormones get all messed up. So here's the paper. Retinol binding protein 4 is elevated and is associated with free testosterone and TSH in postmenopausal women. Quote, postmenopausal women had statistically significantly higher RBP4 levels when compared to premenopausal women. RBP4 levels were negatively associated with free testosterone and positively associated with thyroid stimulating hormone in postmenopausal women. In premenopausal women, RBP4 was positively associated with body mass index. RBP4 levels were increased in postmenopausal women. Although the mechanism is not clear, these findings suggest that RBP4 has a role in the regulation of hormonal and metabolic parameters. So now I'm going to give you a little translation of that study, make it a little simpler for you. Postmenopausal women had higher RBP than premenopausal women. Okay. We're talking about vitamin A here, which is said to be fat soluble, right? Fat soluble things accumulate. That's one of the problems they talk about. Oh, fat-soluble vitamins, you can get toxicity from them. Yeah, you can, especially when it's not a vitamin, but that, you know. So here's one of the things. Kids generally have less weight problems than adults do. And as we get older, it becomes harder and harder to seem to keep the weight off. Well, kids have been alive the least time, so they've had less time to accumulate vitamin A. Adults start accumulating it. They start getting fatter. If they don't figure out how to get rid of it, they become older and they have even more problems. And then you see that serum BMI graph that I showed you where it kind of goes up and curves over. That's what we're talking about. It makes sense to me that postmenopausal women have higher retinol binding protein than premenopausal women, simply because postmenopausal women are older. You guys, just in chat, I'm not taking chat questions during this. This is just a presentation, okay? So we have higher retinol binding protein levels in postmenopausal women. That equals lower free testosterone. That's bad. Higher RBP levels in postmenopausal women equals a higher TSH. This means lower thyroid function. That's bad. Higher retinol binding protein levels in premenopausal women means a higher BMI. They're fatter. Wow, right? What about men? So let's go to men. So that was a study in South Korean women. Okay, so let's go to a different country and let's go to a different sex. Higher retinol binding protein also in men equals fatter men and messed up hormones. So, paper is called Estradiol Testosterone Ratio, Serum Retinol Binding Protein 4, and Insulin Resistance in Overweight and Obese Egyptian Men. Quote, the objective of this work is to determine RBP4 serum levels and evaluate its relationship with serum testosterone, serum estradiol, E2 to T ratio, that's estrogen to testosterone ratio, and insulin resistance in overweight and obese Egyptian men. Continuing. Serum RBP4 and E2 to T ratio were significantly higher, while serum testosterone was significantly lower in overweight and obese groups as compared to normal weight group. In all subjects, serum RBP4 correlated positively with BMI, waist circumference, waist to hip ratio, HOMA-IR, serum E2 and E2 to T ratio. In contrast, it correlated negatively with quantitative insulin sensitivity check index, QUICkie, and serum T, testosterone. In multiple linear regression analysis, serum RBP4 was independently associated with E2 to T ratio. End quote. Let me translate that a bit for you. So they found higher RBP levels in overweight and obese men versus normal weight men. Higher retinol binding protein levels in those overweight and obese men was associated with a higher BMI, or fatter. That's bad. Higher waist circumference. That's bad. Higher waist to hip ratio. That's bad. Lower testosterone. Higher estradiol, also known as E2 in that paper, which is a type of estrogen. Higher estrogen in men is generally bad and is associated with being fatter. Higher estrogen to testosterone ratio. Not good. And worse insulin sensitivity, shown by the higher HOMA-IR score and the lower QUICkie score. That's QUICkie is Q-U-I-C-K-I. It's an acronym. It's a type of insulin resistance measure. Insulin resistance is the stage before diabetes. Okay, that's when you get into metabolic syndrome, stuff like that. Pre-diabetes. So we don't want to be there either. More retinol binding protein in South Korean women and more retinol binding protein in Egyptian men was associated with fatter women and fatter men and worse hormone levels. And then we have the study before that associating all of this. So people who want to argue RBP, retinol binding protein, is not made unless there's vitamin A present. It's your body's, one of the older thoughts is it was one of your body's defenses against vitamin A. It protected you from it. Common science wants to say it's what delivers it. It's not what delivers it. Why would a delivery protein be associated with bigger problems? Okay. And what is known in the science is if you do not have enough retinol binding protein to the amount of retinol that you have, they're supposed to be 1-to-1. If you have too much retinol and not enough retinol binding protein, you are in a world of hurt because retinol itself is known to be toxic. That's why it has to have retinol binding protein. Okay. Don't let anybody try to use the argument of retinol binding protein. We just don't know what it does. It's there to protect you from retinol. Okay. Now let's get into the carotenoids. Everybody's like, oh, but you can take as many carotenoids as you want. You can eat carrots all day and you can eat all this and your body will only make as much vitamin A as you need. Your body will only chop those up as it needs to. And if not, carotenoids don't hurt you at all. That's the story, okay? Let's go into this paper called Carotenemia, a review. Because this quote is great. I mean, the stupidity of this quote is astronomical. Quote, hypothyroidism, diabetes mellitus, hepatic, and renal diseases may be associated with carotenemia, but are not caused by ingestion of carotene. End quote. Let's be clear here. Your body doesn't make carotenoids. Never has, never will. I believe also in this paper it says that there is no known essential function of carotenoids in humans. We do not need them at all. There is nothing that we need carotenoids for in the human body at all. There's no known function that we have to have them for, okay? When you have hypothyroidism, diabetes mellitus type 2, liver is hepatic and renal is kidney. Liver and kidney disease is associated with high blood beta carotene. That's what they mean. They're measuring just one carotenoid, high blood beta carotene, but are not caused by ingestion of carotene. It almost sounds like they're trying to cover up something, doesn't it? Anyway, if you've ever turned orange from carrot juicing or eating, there's a study on African kids during mango season, and they would eat so many mangoes that their skin, where you could see it could turn orange, you could see it turn orange. And what they actually measured in these African kids during mango season was they saw that once their skin turned orange, they had hit the marker of the liver vitamin A stores where they were toxic. So really, the only thing you could say is that by the time your skin is turning orange, your liver is full of retinyl esters and retinol, and you're overflowing, so your body can't chop up the carotenoids anymore, and it stores them in your skin, and you start turning orange. Okay, it doesn't mean, it means you were vitamin A toxic diagnosably at that point. That's what, if you've ever been orange, just because the orange left your skin, your body chopped up those carotenoids, turned each one carotenoid into 2 retinyl esters, and then it stored those other places. And you may not be orange anymore, but you're likely still vitamin A toxic, because if you never got rid of the toxicity, it's still there. Okay, but let's go over, gosh, is hypothyroidism associated with obesity? Most of us go, well, yeah, we kind of know that when your thyroid's not working good, you're going to gain weight. That's kind of obvious. We know that, hypothyroidism and weight gain. But let's just go into a paper just to be sure. The paper is called Hypothyroidism and Obesity, Cause or Effect. Quote, obesity was higher, 46% versus 34% in overt hypothyroidism than in subclinical hypothyroidism. More patients were overweight in overt hypothyroidism group than in subclinical hypothyroidism group. In obesity patients, overt hypothyroidism was present in 33% and subclinical hypothyroidism in 11% of patients. Overall thyroid dysfunction was found more in obese individuals with varying degree of significance. End quote. So what they're saying is the fatter somebody is, the more likely they have worse thyroid function. That makes sense, doesn't it? That's just an association, but we're painting the picture here. Okay. Now let's go into the fun one for the people who love to say, well, if you eat food-based vitamin A, it absolutely can't cause problems, and you can eat as much liver as you want and as much carotenoids as you want, and you'll never get toxic. It's only supplements and medications that can cause you to get vitamin A toxic. Well, we just went over the carotenoids one just a second ago, right? They didn't distinguish between food and supplements. They didn't even bother to go there. But let's get right to it. Let's get into how eating beef liver is known to cause chronic headaches. And it just so happens that every person who had chronic headaches from eating beef liver was also obese. The paper is called Liver Lover's Headache, Pseudotumor cerebri and Vitamin A Intoxication. This is a long one. Quote, we wish to draw attention to the dietary habits of patients with pseudotumor cerebri, PTC, a syndrome of elevated intracranial pressure that typically occurs in obese young women and is characterized by headache and papilledema. The nature of this condition is usually undiscovered, but is associated with a variety of disorders, the most predictable of which is vitamin A intoxication. In fact, pseudotumor cerebri occurs in 30% to 50% of patients with hypervitaminosis A. This causal relationship prompted us to conduct a dietary survey of approximately 50 patients with idiopathic PTC. Surprisingly, we discovered 5 patients who ate beef liver at least once or twice a week. Continuing the quote, several patients consumed liver at multiple meals during a single day or regularly on luncheon sandwiches. 2 patients disclosed that they routinely purchased 6 to 24 pounds of liver each week. None of the patients were using any of the medications occasionally associated with PTC. Dietetic estimates of daily vitamin A intake in the 5 patients were 60,000 IU, 64,000 IU, 70,000 IU, 87,000 IU, and 341,000 IU. Recommended dietary allowance is 4,000 to 5,000 IU per day. Random serum vitamin A levels, normally 30 to 70 mcgs per deciliter, were elevated in 4 of the 5 patients. 75 mcgs per deciliter, 107 mcgs per deciliter, 121 mcgs per deciliter, and 146 mcgs per deciliter. 2 patients were men and 3 were women. All 5 patients were mildly to severely obese, and each had habitually ingested liver for several years or more. These observations in adults warrant closer attention to the possibility of habitual ingestion of liver and other dietary sources of vitamin A in patients with PTC. Added scrutiny of the diet is further justified because liver and vegetables rich in vitamin A are often recommended in weight-reducing diets. End quote. Okay. How about that? Liver is never toxic, right? And then people say, well, you just don't eat too much. And then I go, well, what's too much? What's the magical number of too much? And they'll be like, oh, well, it's some number that they pull out of their rear end. And I go, how do you know that's not too much? How do you know that we need any of this at all? Because we have multiple people who are eating low vitamin A for over a year now. Grant's been doing it 6 years. I've been doing it I'm at 15 months. I'm not dying here. My skin's not falling off. My eyes are great. Maybe we were just fed a bunch of lies. So now we're going to review how your body makes the Accutane chemical out of any vitamin A that you eat. Okay? This is I've done a longer video on this. If you want to go and watch it, You can. I've taken this all apart. It's just science, okay? So, link from the FDA. Quote, chemically, isotretinoin is 13-cis-retinoic acid and is related to both retinoic acid and retinol, vitamin A, end quote. Isotretinoin is the drug name of Accutane, Roaccutane, and there's some other names out there from foreign companies that I'm not familiar with. Okay, isotretinoin is 13-cis-retinoic acid. Same chemical. Okay. Now, here's the paper. 2 papers. Here, the paper is called 13-cis-retinoic acid is an endogenous compound in human serum. Let me just define endogenous. Means created within your system. It doesn't mean your body made it from scratch. It means, it can be, you can turn retinol into 13-cis-retinoic acid, and that would be called endogenous. Like if you go out in the sun and you make vitamin D, that is endogenous production of vitamin D. Do you understand that? You didn't make the vitamin, you took cholesterol and you turned it into vitamin D. That is endogenous versus exogenous, where you take pills of rat poison. I mean vitamin D supplements. If you don't believe me, look up Terra D3 blocks, TERA D3, next word BLOX. That's vitamin D3 supplements used as rat poison. So that's a whole nother topic that I think I have some other videos here on this about that too. So don't take those either. But 13-cis-retinoic acid can be created inside the human body. So here's the quote. The presence of 13-cis-RA as the predominant form of retinoic acid in human urine under normal physiological conditions recently has been reported. After a meal, the concentration of total retinoic acids was 36% greater compared to fasting subjects. This indicates that the level of retinoic acid in human serum is influenced by dietary intake. End quote. Let me put those two together for you. 13-cis-retinoic acid is Accutane. 13-cis-retinoic acid is the predominant form of retinoic acid in human pee, urine, under normal conditions. These are not people taking Accutane. These are people eating food and turning it into the same chemical as Accutane. And if somebody's going to be out there and say, oh, well, the natural Accutane in your body is different than the Accutane in the pill, do you understand what you're arguing? Is somebody going to be like, well, the natural Prozac your body makes is different than the pharmaceutical Prozac? Do you see how silly that sounds? Okay? They're the same chemical. If you don't trust that chemists can look at a chemical and say that they're the same, boy, you got a lot of fixing to do and probably all the scientific things you want to talk about, okay? And then eating a regular meal raised all the retinoic acids in the blood. And then we have the line right before that said 13-cis-retinoic acid was the main retinoic acid in normal urine, okay? One more. Circulating endogenous retinoic acid concentrations among participants enrolled in a randomized placebo-controlled clinical trial of retinol palmitate. Okay, so that's the paper's name. They're giving these people retinol palmitate. It's a very common food fortification vitamin A. It's a very common supplement vitamin A. And if you didn't know, if you are eating animal sources of vitamin A, people out there love to talk about how the food vitamin A is retinol. It's mostly not. It's retinol esters like retinol palmitate and retinol stearate. Go look it up. I have evidence of this all over the place too. Retinol esters are the storage form of vitamin A. Very little vitamin A in your body is running around at any one time as retinol. We measured that, but we should be measuring retinol esters. So anyway, retinol palmitate, supplement, fortified foods. It's also what's mostly in liver. It's also what's mostly in dairy. It's also what's mostly in cod liver oil, retinol, esters, including retinol palmitate. Quote, this study suggests that supplementation with retinol palmitate is an effective means to increase circulating all-trans, 9-cis, and 13-cis retinoic acid concentrations among humans. End quote. So taking, in effect, cod liver oil, retinol palmitate would be a way to increase your Accutane concentrations in your body. The other thing you would want to know is all-trans retinoic acid, ATRA, all-trans retinoic acid, is also known as retin A. So your body makes retin A out of vitamin A as well. Carotenoids turn into retinol and retinaldehyde. Retinaldehyde is an aldehyde. Those get turned into retinoic acids, including retin A, all-trans retinoic acid, and Accutane, 13-cis retinoic acid. So now that we've gone through all of that, what happens when people just take Accutane, the straight chemical, instead of letting their body transform it, which some people are going to think magically protects them, but it doesn't. Quote, or I'm sorry, the paper is called The Effect of Isotretinoin on Insulin Resistance and Adipocytokine Levels in Acne Vulgaris Patients. Quote, within 5 months of isotretinoin treatment, higher HOMA-IR values were found. Isotretinoin therapy maintained lower mean resistin levels, higher mean RBP4 levels, but not affected the mean adiponectin and leptin levels. Conclusions. All data suggests that 5 months of isotretinoin therapy in acne vulgaris patients causes insulin resistance. And the increase in insulin resistance is not dependent on age, BMI, BFM, I believe that means body fat mass, and lipid levels in these patients. End quote. So HOMA-IR, we mentioned that earlier as being a marker of insulin resistance. I have this little paper here. It's a quote from a paper. HOMA-IR had a significant positive correlation with BMI. The higher the HOMA-IR, the higher the BMI. The worse the insulin resistance, the fatter the person. More vitamin A, higher HOMA-IR. Higher HOMA-IR, fatter people. Are we getting a pattern here yet? Are we getting it? Moving on. Now we're getting into the other connections where people go, but this didn't used to happen. Why is it happening now? What's going on now? Well, in the last 45 years, we have introduced glyphosate, also known as Roundup, heavily to the environment. It is in the rain. It is in the lakes. It is in the streams. There's some going to be in your organic food too. But eating organic is the best way to reduce your exposure. The thing about eating organic, whether or not, some people say it has more nutrients in it. Some people say, well, it really doesn't. It's not that. The thing about it is, if you eat non-organic, you are guaranteed to expose yourself to more toxicity. That's what you're guaranteed to do. Should be obvious, right? Eating organic at least reduces your exposure to the toxins, particularly to glyphosate. If you're watching this video, you probably already know that glyphosate, aka Roundup, is horrible for humans. There's giant lawsuits out there, multiple myeloma, leukemia caused by glyphosate exposure. It's bad. It's really bad. It's probably what's driving the vitamin A toxicity epidemic. Mostly, not all of it, but mostly. So how does this play into vitamin A toxicity and obesity? You're going to have to follow me here. Glyphosate has been shown to slow down or stop some of the pathways that the body needs to break down vitamin A. So if you can't break down something and detox something, you build it up, right? Okay. We're going to do a paper from Stephanie Seneff. Glyphosate, Pathways to Modern Diseases, Part 2, Celiac Sprue and Gluten Intolerance. Quote, glyphosate has been shown to exhibit teratogenic effects in line with known consequences of excess retinoic acid exposure to the embryo, and we propose that the mechanism for this effect may be glyphosate's known disruption of cytochrome enzymes, which are involved in retinoic acid catabolism. In summary, glyphosate's disruption of the cytochrome enzymes responsible for retinoic acid catabolism could lead to an excess bioavailability of retinoic acid that could contribute adversely to celiac disease, as well as damaging the liver and leading to teratogenic effects in the offspring of exposed individuals. So the cytochrome system is one of the last parts of vitamin A detoxification. That's where the retinoic acids get broken down and detoxified. Blocking that would be, well, here's how that works. You block the cytochromes, you build up retinoic acids. Retinoic acids, I have the paper on this. Retinoic acids actually then they slow down the system right ahead of it, called what I call the dehydrogenase system, aldehyde dehydrogenase and alcohol dehydrogenase. And those get slowed down, and then you build up all the other vitamin A's. And then you get toxic. Then we have an epidemic of vitamin A toxicity. So what were they talking about here? So what they were saying is glyphosate's known side effect problems or intended effects, I don't think any of this is an accident. You disrupt those cytochrome enzymes, and they're seeing the same types of birth defects that you see with vitamin A toxicity. And they're saying we also see celiac disease and liver disease. And liver disease is a known side effect of vitamin A toxicity. So anyway, we have glyphosate increases your vitamin A concentrations through slowing the detox. Well, gosh, is there any correlation between glyphosate introduction and obesity rates going up? This is another paper. Stephanie Seneff was part of this one. The paper is called Glyphosate Suppression of Cytochrome P450 Enzymes and Amino Acid Biosynthesis by the Gut Microbiome, Pathways to Modern Diseases. This is a good one. Quote, the obesity epidemic began in the United States in 1975, simultaneous with the introduction of glyphosate into the food chain. And it has steadily escalated in step with increased usage of glyphosate in agriculture. While it is common knowledge that Americans are continuing to grow more and more obese with each passing year, there may be less awareness that obesity aligns with glyphosate usage elsewhere in the world. For example, South Africa arguably has the highest obesity rates in all of Africa, and it is also the African country that has most heavily embraced glyphosate usage since the 1970s and has freely adopted genetically modified crops with little regulation. According to the World Health Organization statistics, only 2.7% of adults in the United Kingdom were obese in 1972, a number that rose to 25.8% in 1999. Today, 2/3 of UK citizens are either overweight or obese. There is a substantial alignment among countries worldwide with low or decreasing birth rates. Seems like they're controlling their population. Anyway, emerging obesity problems and an increasing glyphosate burden. Given the arguments presented here, it is plausible that glyphosate is causal in these trends. End quote, if I didn't say that already. So we have multiple countries, as we see glyphosate use going up, obesity is going up. Glyphosate has distinct mechanisms of slowing down the breakdown of vitamin A. Okay. Now we have these papers talking about, I think I put my slide in the wrong place here, but I'm going to go through it anyway. The obesity and the diabetes connection. Yeah, oh yeah, we're continuing with connecting the glyphosate here. I wanted to define the insulin resistance part so we can go into the glyphosate and diabetes here. Okay, so we talked about HOMA-IR and we talked about the quickie tests and how they were both worsened by vitamin A. Increasing insulin resistance is the precursor to diabetes. This is well known, well accepted, pretty normal. The World Health Organization says that 90% of type 2 diabetics are obese or overweight. Most of us know this. When you're talking to a type 2 diabetic, they are typically overweight or obese. This is pretty normal. 90% is a pretty strong correlation, right? So if glyphosate increases vitamin A, and vitamin A worsens insulin resistance, and insulin resistance is the precursor to diabetes, and both insulin resistance and diabetes are associated with weight gain and obesity, we can then jump and say more glyphosate should equal more diabetes, right? I don't have a way. I'm going to have to hold up a chart for you again here. I was going to do a picture-in-picture presentation today, but it just didn't work out. Now, this graph will be in the notes in the slideshow that is linked down in the blurb below the video, okay? What you're going to be looking for here, let me see if we can see this. So those little bars, that's glyphosate use since the 1970s going up. The green line, let me see, the green line going across like this, that's the line that should have happened if glyphosate use didn't. This was the trend for diabetes. That was the diabetes trend based on these numbers right here. That was where the diabetes trend would have gone. This is where the diabetes trends went. Did I say that all wrong? I'm sorry. The bars are diabetes. The green line is the diabetes that would have continued, the level of diabetes that would have continued based on these numbers. That's the diabetes bars that would have gone on. The blue line and the red line are glyphosate use. Blue line is the percent of GE, the percent of crops that are genetically engineered soy and corn crops. The red line is glyphosate used on corn and soy. Do you see how those lines pretty much encompass the bars? Well, that's a weird correlation, isn't it? Sorry, I had that wrong first. That graph is from the paper Aluminum and Glyphosate Can Synergistically Induce Pineal Gland Pathology, Connection to Gut Dysbiosis and Neurological Disease. Stephanie Seneff was in on that one too. So, we just went through how glyphosate connects with weight gain, and we see that glyphosate use connects with the rate of diabetes, and diabetes goes along with weight gain. How many different ways can I connect this? Let's go into birth control now. One of my least favorite topics, because birth control is a disaster, ladies. It is a disaster. No getting around this. I have a whole video on this channel about how the title of it is Birth Control Ruins Health. Here's the science of how. I go through multiple studies. I'm covering the scientific literature since back in 1975 about how all forms of birth control raise vitamin A levels in women's body. This has been shown over and over and over and over and over again. What's the birth control doing? It's shutting down the detox of vitamin A. Because birth control is not vitamin A, right? You're not taking pills of vitamin A for birth control. Although, wait, one of the known side effects of vitamin A toxicity is reproductive organ damage. Maybe birth control raising vitamin A, that's part of how it works. Could be. Let me give you a sample from one of the papers about how birth control raises vitamin A. The paper is called Serum Vitamin A and Retinol Binding Protein in Malnourished Women Treated with Oral Contraceptives, Effective Estrogen Dose and Duration of Treatment. Quote, malnourished women who have been treated with combination type oral contraceptives containing 0.03 milligrams or 0.05 milligrams of ethinyl estradiol and 0.15 milligrams D-norgestrel had
significantly higher levels of serum retinol binding protein and vitamin A after 2 to 5 cycles of treatment compared with untreated control subjects. Significantly higher RBP, that's not associated with good things, is it? And significantly higher vitamin A. They weren't taking vitamin A though, were they? So what about the evidence? Does birth control itself raise obesity to then connect all these? Birth control use is associated with increasing obesity, and the longer someone uses birth control, the worse it is. From the paper, Oral Contraceptives Use and Development of Obesity in a Mediterranean Cohort, the SUN Project. Quote, according to our prospective cohort study, oral contraceptive use is significantly associated with higher odds of obesity development, especially when the use of oral contraceptives is steady and extends over periods of more than 2 years. The association between oral contraceptive use and higher odds of obesity development appears to have a dose-dependent effect. Since we found a trend for the association between every 2 additional years of oral contraceptive use, I keep wanting to say OC, oral contraceptive use and the development of obesity. In addition, oral contraceptive use over prolonged periods of time was also associated with higher odds of obesity development. End quote. Birth control raises vitamin A. Birth control increases obesity. Glyphosate raises vitamin A. Glyphosate increases obesity. Oh, let's connect antidepressants. Some people go, I started taking this antidepressant and all of a sudden I just ballooned up. Are antidepressants associated with increasing obesity? From the paper, antidepressant utilization and incidence of weight gain during 10 years follow-up, population-based cohort study. Quote, widespread utilization of antidepressants may be contributing to long-term increased risk of weight gain at population level. End quote. Now we're going to link antidepressants to raising vitamin A. What they do is they block the breakdown of vitamin A. So catabolism is breakdown, right? We got to know that word. Catabolism is breakdown. I'm not going to read a quote from this paper because the title is enough. Direct inhibition of retinoic acid catabolism by fluoxetine. I'll read that title again for you. Direct inhibition of retinoic acid catabolism by fluoxetine. Prozac stops the breakdown of retinoic acid. What retinoic acid was the most prominent in the human body under normal conditions? 13-cis-retinoic acid. 13-cis-retinoic acid directly increased insulin resistance, which then directly increases weight gain. Remember all this? Are you catching all this? Have I connected it in enough ways yet? Now I want to go over one other thing about vitamin A. So I mean, the weight gain thing is very, very important. It's a side effect, though. It's an effect. It's not a cause. We're talking about the cause. It's vitamin A. But I wanted to go over, some people think, but you need vitamin A. You need it. What if I told you that if you're a well-nourished person, which most of you watching this video are likely well-nourished people, you've got internet, you're probably doing pretty okay. You're probably not starving on a daily basis. You're not what we would call a malnourished person. This part's important for you. From the paper, the neurotoxic effects of vitamin A and retinoids. Wait, let me read that again. The neurotoxic effects of vitamin A and retinoids. Quote, nonetheless, it has been demonstrated that vitamin A intake among well-nourished subjects may lead to decreased life quality and increased mortality rates. End quote. Vitamin A intake. They didn't say a certain amount. They just said vitamin A intake. Vitamin A intake among well-nourished subjects means decreased life quality and increased mortality rates, earlier death. You're well-nourished, you eat vitamin A, earlier death, lower quality of life. We now have life expectancy in the US having dropped for the second year in a row. We have life expectancy going down, obesity rates going up. Funny thing, we have golden rice, beta carotene, genetically modified rice just got approved. We have biofortified foods getting approved. They're things like sweet potatoes that they're making even more vitamin A in. We have vitamin A in cosmetics. We have vitamin A fortified foods. We're being told to eat a rainbow. We got people out there telling you, eat more dairy. Dairy's good for you. Eat more liver. Eat more egg yolks. It's everywhere. I could go over that list again. I already went over that list at the start. So if you're wondering, how could I be vitamin A toxic? Even just the glyphosate part can cause vitamin A toxicity, okay? So in conclusion, I'm going to review the things that I went through at the start so I can show that I've went over all of these with references. Serum retinol levels correlate almost exactly with body mass index in Americans. Higher levels of vitamin A are associated with higher BMI in men and women. Don't forget the deranged hormones. High levels of blood beta carotene are associated with hypothyroidism, which is also associated with obesity. Eating liver, the highest vitamin A food, regularly has been associated with obesity and chronic headaches. Accutane use, and if you eat vitamin A, you are making Accutane. Increases insulin resistance and diabetes, both of which are associated with obesity. Obesity is associated with higher RBP levels, and we measure RBP levels to show us what vitamin A is, what vitamin A levels are. Glyphosate inhibits the breakdown of vitamin A, and as glyphosate use has risen, so have obesity rates. Birth control use raises vitamin A levels, and birth control increases the risk of obesity. Antidepressants inhibit the breakdown of vitamin A, and antidepressants increase obesity rates. So how do we fix this problem? One, the glyphosate issue. Eat organic. Goodness gracious. Avoid the toxins in your food first. I mean, you got to eat, right? We have to eat. There's lots of other toxic things you don't have to do that are easy to just not do, but you have to eat. You have to drink. Get a filter, get a water filter for your drinking water, especially, that gets glyphosate out. Berkey will do that. So will reverse osmosis. Get the glyphosate out of your water because it's in the water. Don't eat it in your food. That's easy. Then you want to reduce all of your exposures to vitamin A. Foods, supplements, cosmetics, medications. You want to increase low vitamin A foods that can help detox your body of this poison. Now, this is stuff I go over in my vitamin A detox program, and that'll be linked below. That's what I work on. That's what I do. We want to avoid specific foods, supplements, medications that make this problem worse. And I have big lists of these things in the detox program. More than you think. There's a lot of things you're being sold on that are good for you by the mainstream and the controlled opposition alternative mainstream. You got to know there's the mainstream and then there's the alternative mainstream. Controlled opposition. They always make a yin and yang to get you, the mainstream people, believing, and then the people who don't want to believe the mainstream. There's always a mainstream alternative. They're both leading you down the wrong track. Then these are covered, all of them. This is my life's work. This is covered in the vitamin A aldehydes and glyphosate detox program at my website, my network at nutrition-restored.mn.co. nutrition-restored.mn.co. And once you're in there, well, it's paid access for the glyphosate and vitamin A and aldehydes detox program. But getting in the network is free. So my website, my other website, if you want to work with me, testing minerals, getting nutrients tested and getting those back to normal and bringing down the toxic stuff, that is nutritionrestored.com. My network, again, I mentioned that just a second ago. That's where the vitamin A detox program is. That's kind of a do-it-yourselfer type thing. That's nutrition-restored.mn.co. My website, my YouTube. You may be watching this on YouTube. You may be watching this on BitChute. They're both Nutrition Restored channel. YouTube is youtube.com/nutrition restored. My BitChute, it's going to be easiest just for you to go there and search for Nutrition Restored. So if I ever disappear from here, BitChute is where you'll find me. So that's all I got for you today. Again, I'm Dr. Garrett Smith of Nutrition Restored, the Nutrition Detective. Hope y'all enjoyed it. Hope you can start taking steps to help your health and others. And we'll see you next time. Bye.